Hello, everybody. This is Morality Matters, and I am your host, Mike Belton, and I'm joined today by Chaplain Kevin. And welcome, Kevin, to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It's great to see you.
All right. Well, it's good to have you here. We got an important topic to talk tonight. We're going to be talking about persecution of Christians, which I don't think is something that's really discussed a lot here in America. Um, we have these world type of events that happen that seem very significant. For some reason, our local media has a tendency to overlook them. But before we get started, I kind of want to go over a few stats. This has really come to a forefront because our president raised it as an issue, as a possible thing to get to for the U.S. to intervene on. Because in Nigeria right now, it's been going on for a number of years. Going back to 2009, there have been over 50,000 Christians allegedly who have been killed because of their faith. There's been over 2,000 schools that have been burned to the ground, over 18,000 churches that have been destroyed, over 7,000 people allegedly have been killed this year, hundreds kidnapped, uh, allegedly over 3,000, 3 million people in Nigeria that have been displaced due to violence. It just seems like an absolute train wreck going on over there. And according to what's being reported out there by the Trump administration, this is due to radical Islamics being responsible for carrying out these attacks.
President Trump is ratcheting up the pressure on Nigeria. Islamic terrorists there have been murdering Christians as well as fellow Muslims for years. The president is threatening not just to pull aid from that West African country unless it stops, but also send in the military, as he put it, guns a-blazing.
Why do you think we don't hear about that a whole lot in the U.S.?
Well, I think that being in this country where things are relatively safe for Christians right now, we have the luxury to kind of ignore what's going on in other kinds of the world. And it's inconvenient to minimize our problems to focus on somebody else's problems. So we just
I just find it very interesting because there's all these organizations out there, right? There's all these people that they're always asking for money. We hear about hunger and starvation in Africa. We hear about all these other different issues out there of problems that are going on. But for some reason, when Christians are targeted at an alarmingly high rate, it doesn't seem like that makes our news, and it doesn't reach the cycle. Now that the president is really considering options about intervening, what do you think? You think it would become more of a talking point?
Absolutely. I think when the president's making a statement about any sort of conflict around the world, it becomes a talking point for other people. They want to know more about it, right?
For years, CBN News has reported about the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. Tens of thousands have died at the hands of Islamic terror groups Boko Haram, the Islamic State West Africa province, and Fulani herdsmen. Now some legacy media outlets are finally reporting what we've been telling you all along. So what can be done now that the plight of Nigerian Christians is receiving broader attention right here in America and around the world?
So one of the things I think that's kind of really concerning to me, though, is where's the church in all of this, right? Because we are supposed to be the body of Christ. So like our brothers and sisters in Christ in Africa, it should deeply affect us that we have tens of thousands of Christians being slaughtered because of their faith. I've listened to some of these stories that are out there about Christians gathering and then just being mowed down, others being kidnapped and having to dig their own graves to end up being buried alive. These like absolutely horrific stories that I hear, being cut down by machetes. It's just things that are unfathomable to us here in the U.S., but are going on out there. And I tell you, I'm in tune with a lot of churches, a lot of pastors, and for some reason, they just do not talk about this. Do you have any thoughts behind that? Why that doesn't happen?
I do. I think, there are churches and there are even denominations that seem to focus more on activism and social awareness and what Christians can do in the world to make it a better place. But I also think that there's churches that hunker down and try to really focused on keeping people in the word and not focused on the activism type stuff. So depending on which church you're at, you may hear more or less about different things like this going around the world, particularly with Nigeria.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's something too, like because I know like a majority, I'd probably say a majority of Christian churches in the US, they have some kind of outreach, right? So they're either supporting a missions team, a missionary group. They're out there trying to be active in there. And I know, they build schools, they build wells, they do all these kind of things. They try to do things to spread the gospel message, give out Bibles, do a lot of good deeds and stuff like that. But I don't sometimes. Maybe it's just me, but I don't hear a lot of times an outrage or any kind of voice of the church that says something needs to happen because Christians are being targeted. I don't see the Christian leaders out there that are standing up saying, "Why is this happening? Why isn't it being resolved?"
Yeah, I could tell you from a close friend who was working in Haiti that there were Christians on the ground in Haiti during the worst times, and they were involved. And it was churches you wouldn't necessarily think about. It was the Mennonite Church, which we don't hear a lot about because they're kind of a very specific denomination. But they were out there in force, helping on the ground in Haiti. So I wouldn't say that Christians aren't there, but I would say that Christians aren't unified in their voice. To support these people that are in these areas that are being prosecuted.
Yeah. So when I kind of think of like, you know, President Trump looking at taking action, what do you think some of the things that we could possibly do when you talk about U.S. intervention? I
Hmm.
mean, do you think it's boots on the ground? Do you think it's like support? Do you think it's some kind of security kind of thing? Like, what do you think are some like if you had to propose options maybe to the president or like things like that, like what are some of the things that we could actually do that would be helpful to like Nigeria?
So I think the Nigerian problem is complex. I think you're dealing with a terrorist organization. You're dealing with a government that's not helping. Boko Haram, who we've had problems with forever, I think is out there persecuting Christians, and it's going to be tough.
So tell us the latest there. Senator Ted Cruz contends it's genocide. So how bad is it?
You know, for Christians in northern Nigeria, that they know every time they gather for worship, even if they are in their homes, even if they are going out to their fields, they are at risk. They are at risk of attacks, as you mentioned, Boko Haram, other radical Islamist groups that are active in northern Nigeria. And every year and every election cycle in Nigeria, we hear a government promise to solve this problem, promise to provide protection for religious minorities like Christians in the north. And every year we see more attacks and more people killed. So it's either a lack of will or a lack of ability.
In the military, we talk about DIME, right? So what is DIME? That's our diplomacy, that's our information, that's our military, and that's our economic. Generally, we reserve our military boots on the ground as our last possible option.
Right.
So as a country, we have tools, and as Christians, we have other tools. So I think, in a situation like this, before we put boots on the ground, we have to look at how we're supporting the Christians in Nigeria with, financially, with diplomacy, with information to help turn the tide back in their favor.
Yeah. I obviously come from a military background, retired Army guy too. I think it's a real security threat personally. I think that there's probably some type of intervention that needs to happen if their government requests it, if they're really looking for help to solve it. And that's a whole different issue, right? Like,
Right.
I'm pretty sure the president's going to receive options of like, what are the types of things they can do? But I don't think you could actually go in there and do anything economically or that's going to help uh, Christians being persecuted. One of the craziest stories that I heard recently was just under the Biden administration, like they were like Nigeria was on the watch list during Trump's first presidency. Then Biden came along the second one and said, "Oh, we'll take them off the watch list." The reason why people are dying over there is because of economic conditions and climate change and all these other kinds of things. I'm just like, that doesn't lead to Christian persecution. Christian persecution is a targeting of a specific group some people will even call it a genocide that's religiously motivated in nature. Um, I don't know if you can get there personally through diplomacy or through economic or by information alone. I think there's going to have to be some kind of security related response to try to get the situation under control, and then you can go in and help people out, because I think security is probably their number one issue that they're probably facing right now.
Strengthening the Nigerian response, strengthening the Nigerian police and military. But ultimately, this is a spiritual question. And Jesus said, the world hates me, and when you follow me, the world will hate you too. And our brothers and sisters in northern Nigeria are experiencing the reality, the truth of what Jesus said. The Bible also tells us, as part of the body of Christ, that when one part suffers, we're all supposed to feel that pain. So part of the answer to that question is we as Christians, we need to stand with our Nigerian brothers and sisters. We need to pray for them. We need to help when they're persecuted, when their homes are destroyed, when their husbands are killed. We need to be willing to stand with them and encourage them and provide for them.
Yeah, so I think if it was a security-related response, that should be a UN type response with a security force that understood the culture of the area. Particularly since we shifted to the Department of War, I think we're moving away from the U.S. going in alone and providing security alone. But I do think that that's always an option. And we've certainly employed that in several countries to ensure safety of populations in areas of conflict.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the United Nations. I mean, because certainly that could be an option, right? And I know, like for us, we have within our own military, we have Africa Command. They do a lot of stuff with European Command. A lot of times they do a lot of stuff together, but Africa Command is one where we look at making military responses within Africa, right? So, but in that, I've seen so many different things in the past, because I remember back in the day when we were looking at Zaire, right? That's how old I am. Going back in my time in the military is the times where there was conflicts in Zaire, and I was part of CTAF out of Italy. We were actually looking at potentially parachuting on in there and doing a security control of the situation and get the absolute violence that was happening there under control. Yeah. And I'm wondering. I know this current administration is not a fan of wanting to put boots on the ground or starting any wars anywhere. And this wouldn't be a war. This would be more of coming to an aid. But I'm wondering if how well do you think the American population would receive us getting involved in something that seems to be coming to the defense of Christians?
That's a tough question, and I honestly don't know how to answer it. I think it depends on how we employ information internally, right? So I think we generally like to help people in need as a society, right? I don't think Christians are removed from that because they're Christians. I do think that when it becomes hard, a wicked problem where it takes an ample amount of time, an ample amount of money, I think that's when there's a tension between why are we supporting, a population in a country that really doesn't feed back into our nation. And I'm speaking in general terms, not specifically Nigeria when I say that. And that's, there's this tension. And it really puts pressure on political institutions to maybe even get out of a situation where they're providing support. We've seen that throughout our history as well.
Why the Democratic Republic of Congo?
We've seen so many violent attacks, even in the last few months in DRC. There are more than 100 armed groups that are fighting in the country of Democratic Republic of the Congo right now. And many of them are motivated by that Islamist ideology. The same ideology that motivates Boko Haram in Nigeria is motivating some of the groups in DRC that are attacking churches, targeting pastors, and especially targeting Christians. And like I say, the level of violence is just almost unconscionable what they are doing to our Christian brothers and sisters. And so we want to raise awareness of that. We want people to be able to pray effectively. And so One of the things we do each year for the International Day of Prayer for Persecuted Christians is a short video that you can share in a church service, in a Sunday school class, even with your family and your family devotions time. And this year, that video focuses on DRC.
And they can get that at VOM or download it, or how do they get it?
Persecution.com/IDOP for International Day of Prayer, persecution.com/IDOP. The video is free. You can download it. We'll even send you a DVD. If you prefer to have a solid copy of it, we'll send a DVD to you. We want people to know these stories. We want people to pray for our persecuted brothers and sisters.
It just
And
breaks
Todd,
my heart to hear that they're being targeted, they're defenseless in a lot of situations. You're talking about people of peace, trying to spread the gospel message, and here they're just being just slaughtered, and it's just senseless killing just because. And we see it in America too. Just you see the political violence that's happening in America. Just because you don't agree with someone and their viewpoints, that all of a sudden that you now feel like you can take violence against that. Not uncommon for certain Islamic extremist groups, but it seems to be something that becomes to be growing now. You got some things that you want to share with us, right?
Yeah, I think that what you're talking about directly applies. There's biblical wisdom that discusses religious persecution, and it comes out of Jesus's mouth, right? And in some occasions. So if you turn to me, I'm reading from the CSB Bible, but in John 15:19-20, it says, "If you were of the world would love you as their own." That's where I think most people are, and that's where I think, unfortunately, most Christians are. We're more in the world than we are in our faith. However, because you are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of it, the world hates you. So Jesus is telling his followers that they are going to be hated by their neighbors. Remember the word I spoke to you. A servant is not greater than his master. If they persecute me, Jesus is saying, they will also persecute you. So when we take up our faith, we also take up the understanding that we could be persecuted. And to take a little more action on that, as Kevin, I feel like I could endure some persecution for my faith, right? We know that the early disciples even willingly walked to martyrdom as an expression of their faith. But what's harder is when we're having our children do that, and our spouses do that, and our families do that. That's when our faith becomes a real burden for other members of our family.
Right. One of the things that I know is like when it comes to what we're seeing in Nigeria, and I think we're so displaced, right? We're often on geographically separated from like Africa, Europe, and a lot of things that go on over there, right? And we kind of live in our own bubble at times, right? But that's literally what's happening over there, right? Families are being slaughtered, and it's not just, hey, we round up the guy who's preaching, right? It's him, his family, his children, everything, and people just ending up going missing. It's just such a horrific thing to hear happen. And so, um, yeah, thank you for sharing that. You had another verse that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I think, sorry about my dog in the background, but I think that there's something else we need to keep in mind as Christians, right? That, like, I can get very, very angry, and it would pull me out of my Christian compassion and want vengeance, right? That is a very easy place to be when you're watching the atrocities occur that you're talking about. And that's frankly probably one of the things that inspire the Crusades, right? Mm-hmm. Which is probably one of the darkest parts of our Christian history is the Crusades and how we handled that, arguably. But if you turn to Romans 12:19, the Bible gives a very clear answer to how we should respond when we are persecuted. And this is such a hard thing to do. And this is what God calls us, right? So Paul says, friends, do not avenge yourselves. Instead, leave room for God's wrath, because it is written, vengeance belongs to me. I will repay.
Yes. So, yeah, and that's tough, right?
Super.
It's really, really tough, especially when hundreds turns into thousands,
Yeah.
thousands turns into 10,000s, and you're just like, God, like it's time to intervene, right? It's time to get in there. And I can imagine, like even for Jews, like during the time of the Holocaust, when you see the greatest genocide that ever happened in recorded history, uh, in times of World War II happened, that they probably felt the same way. Like, God, we're getting wiped out here,
Hmm.
you know, and it just kept going, kept going. Um, for me, I probably take a little bit different of approach. Again, I struggle with that a little bit. Like for me, I when I look at that, I just like we need to do something. We need to get in there and make something happen. We have an extraordinary power to an ability to project power from this country in order to save lives. I would much rather us project power to defend freedom, to defend religious freedom, to defend democracy, to defend but I don't want those kinds of things imposed on people. But if their government is looking for support, like, hey, I've lost control, I need help,
Right.
that to me, I think it's a moral obligation to that point that if you have the ability to help, you should.
The
Right?
president is obviously pretty upset about what's going on in Nigeria. Is military action the solution?
John, I go back to President Trump's first inauguration address, and so many people, including myself, to be honest, were afraid that the America First agenda as delivered by him would be kind of an isolationist approach. What we're seeing now, especially in his second term, is something very much more like Reagan, which is peace through strength. And so we'll see what he actually does in Nigeria. But what he's telling the Nigerian government in this case is be careful. We're watching what is happening, and we know what has happened through religious extremism in the past, including massive genocide. And that's what is happening right now.
People,
Right. That's what this channel is about morality. Right.
Yeah.
So, like, one of the things I do is it morally right to go to the defense of another human being that's in trouble? To
Yeah.
me,
I'll
I
give you
would
an example.
say absolutely, right?
I'll give you a biblical example. So there's a woman in the Bible. This is the only time where Jesus showed up to a public execution. You probably know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep.
A woman, adulteress, about to be stoned. Did Jesus let it happen?
Nope.
He did not. He intervened, right? And I think that a country like ours, not even from a Christian perspective, but from a moral perspective, because our values as a country and our worldview is really based on Christian worldview.
Yeah.
I think that we are so blessed with resources and with capability to project power in all four ways I discussed earlier, that we should be doing something. And we should be doing something even if the people in Nigeria weren't Christian. Anytime something like that is going on, God intervene. I mean, I could think of Samaritans that God intervened for. I could think of Gentiles possessed by demons that Jesus intervened for. I could think of sinners all over the map that Jesus intervened for. Anytime there was a person that was othered in the Bible, Jesus stepped in and made him feel welcome.
Right now.
people in Nigeria are pleading for some kind of help from the United States. Listen to this businesswoman.
Things need to be done. It's bad. And if things are not done, this will continue because Nigeria, I know, they're not willing to stop anytime soon. So for me, it's very important they come in because this has been happening for a couple of years now. Nothing has been done. So I feel if Donald Trump said they don't want to come in, they should come in, and there's nothing wrong with that.
She said the United States essentially should come in. There are a lot of people in this country, though, as you know, Jonathan, who think the world the United States should not be the world's policeman.
Sure. The arguments I heard actually reading the New York Times and the BBC today were, this is just something that Donald Trump has looked at and seen the last couple of weeks on some right-wing extremist websites. This has been going on, as this woman said, for years. Since 2009, there's been more than 52,000 Christians who have been martyred for their faith. I just looked at it on the Vatican website, an article from 2 years ago, basically saying the stats are there. Somebody do something. And of course, it's hard to get this into the news in the United States and other places, news about what's going on in Nigeria, unfortunately, until it's so extreme. And what's happening now is extreme. And I'm glad that President Trump is at least saying, hey, we're watching. And do I want the United States to invade Nigeria tomorrow? Absolutely not. I don't think that would solve things. But do we need to be a force for moral good and speak up? Absolutely.
When I look at a situation like this, I think I would be fully supportive of military intervention for the purposes of projecting power for peace, to be able to have security. For me, I think it's a good. I'd much rather be used in a way to help save lives and provide that than to just go in and target other countries and use our military. Like, to me, that needs to be something in the best interest of national security. But when it comes to coming to the aid of another country to project that power in order to maintain security, I would be in support of that.
Peacekeeping force, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of curious in today's days and age how many people, because I see this growing anti-Semitism that seems to be happening in the world. Maybe it's not as bad in the U.S. as the media makes it out to be, but it seems like anti-Semitism happens a lot, and it seems like there's this pushback on Christianity. It might be getting a little bit better, especially after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We see kind of a small revival for youth that's happening. Do you think our country would be in support of taking military action for the purposes of peace?
I think we have been in the past, and I think if we frankly have to be taught. We have to have our hearts appealed to. But absolutely, if that happened first, I think that the average non-Christian would be behind supporting peace when there's persecution.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you, because I looked at another study, and apparently, I didn't really know this, but the United States, it's not a shocker either, but the United States is the most giving country in the world. We give more than any other country. So it would also make sense that if we're so giving to others that are in need, that we would support a posture for our, even though we're called the War Department now, to project military power for peace.
I guarantee you that there would be people that, if you said we need a force to go and provide peace in this region where this is happening to these people, you would have volunteers coming from out of the high schools and out of the colleges, and they would put their name on the dotted line just to be part of something good. Because I think that, American society craves goodness right now.
Yeah, we need a little bit more goodness. We need better stories where we're doing like really truly incredible things, and we certainly are capable as a nation to do incredibly good things. And we have a lot of really good people who have really good hearts. I believe in America. I believe in our ability to be able to do wonderful and good things in the world. And when I see something like this, and I see people just slaughtered by the tens of thousands, to me, I think it would be immoral not to do something now that's been brought to our attention at this rate, to say, hey, something's got to change over there.
Yeah.
And we can be a difference maker. So,
Yeah.
and our current administration seems to be the guy who's the peacemaker. So I think it would be aligned if he can make it work in such a way to go, okay, I don't mind putting boots on the ground for the purposes of peace. So.
Yeah, I think about a similar situation, and that was, Darfur, and that was years ago, and it was absolutely horrible. And it took peacekeeping forces to intervene to bring some stability to that country. And, even that stability is fragile over time. So it requires a reinvestment, right? But I do think that at our heart, Americans are people that want to do good for the world because we have the capability to do good for the world. We don't want to be complete isolationists and just enjoy our privilege. We want to use our privilege to help others. So,
no, that's absolutely great. And you know what? And that's the morality behind this story, right? And so we'll be watching. I'm looking forward to see what the administration does in response to what's going on in Nigeria. And I'm also very interested in public reaction. What is the overall sense of how we do it?
I worry about, and you know this term, but compassion fatigue, though. And this is what we always have to balance. There's so much. We are way outside of the Garden of Eden, right? There's so much pain in the world. There's so many places to get involved, and it's so easy for us to also step back and say, I can't make a dent in all the issues that are in this world, right? And this goes back to how we communicate the need, right? I always tell people, if you can make an impact for one person, then you've done what God wanted you to do that day. So I think we need to start small, think big. Because when all of us are working together towards something and when that thing is putting goodness out, like, the world could be a lot better than it is now.
Very well said. And with that, that's our show on Morality Matters, because morality, it definitely matters. And in this case, we'll be looking forward to that response. And for the rest of you out there, thanks for watching it, and God bless you. Thanks for being on the show there.
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you for having me.